Welcome back to Record Live. It's great to have you with us today on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, wherever you're watching from. It's really nice to join you and to chat about some really interesting things. I think very helpful for me. I'm hoping to learn something today. First of all, welcome back, Zanita. Good to have you as always. And we have a special guest today. Melody is joining me from the office next door, which is we are
Hi.
it's just behind me through the bookshelf. It's really great to have you today, Melody. You are what did you tell me earlier? The project manager?
Project manager,
Mums at the
project
Table.
leader, general gopher.
Doing a lot of work with Mums at the Table. And Mums at the Table, for those who may not have heard of it before, is a ministry. Well, you tell us about it, Melody. What is Mums at the Table in a nutshell?
I like to use 3 words, and it is here with you. So it's basically about supporting mums in their motherhood journey in whatever way you can think of. Maybe not the nappy changing. But we'll have tips on that too.
You've got tips, but don't want to get your hands dirty, as it were.
No, I'm past that now.
Past that stage. So one thing we're going to talk about today, hopefully, is that parenting journey. And what I've noticed, so for those that don't know, in December this year, I had another child, a young boy, baby boy. And with all the things that come with babies, unsettled sometimes after feeds, all the changing nappies and sleepless nights and all of that stuff. And it can be really hard as a parent to find time to spiritually connect with the church, to do all the church things you might have once done, to spend time with God, devotion, worship, Bible study, some of those things that we sort of really emphasize as Christians as being the be all and end all. In some ways, it's the most important things, and they are really important, but it can be quite a challenging time to navigate. So thankfully, Melody is going to have all the answers for us today. She's going to tell us all about it. And we're really thankful to have you on today, Melody. And we're hoping that if you're watching this, whether you're a parent or a grandparent or you are not a parent yet, it'll give you some interesting tips and insights. And I guess it's more than just about parenting, because we do have very busy lives, and it can be a challenge to find a way. How does God fit into that space? So I think it'll be a broad and interesting conversation. But let's kick it off. Tell us about your parenting journey, Melody. Tell us a little bit about being a parent.
It's the hardest thing I've ever done. That is not to say that I don't like my son. I love him and adore him. But yeah, it is really, really challenging. So I gave birth to him. Well, how old is he now? 6.5. So 6.5 years ago, after deciding that I would be, one of those things, double income, no kids kind of lifestyle. That was the lifestyle I was going to have. And then I had my son. I'm still not sure why, but we did. And yeah, so and since then it has been challenging in the sense that especially in the first 6 months to a year. So I was the primary carer for about the first 3 months, and it was not diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure I went through postnatal depression. I was struggling with breastfeeding, and so the baby was hungry all the time. I couldn't feed him. He also had low sleep needs, so he wasn't sleeping, he wasn't feeding, he was crying. It was a lot. Thankfully, he's in primary school now, so it's a lot better now.
How did you find during that time that you survived? Because I think I've heard a lot of mothers, like, motherhood is such a big, I should just tell everyone here I'm not a mother, so everything I say is coming from inexperience and naivety. But I've heard a lot of mothers, they become a mother for the first time and they're just overwhelmed with a new life, basically. And I think a lot of mothers, when they go into that, and fathers as well, they experience like guilt or that not spending time with God. It's like this drastic change of like before and after.
Yes,
How did you deal with that?
definitely. It was really difficult at the beginning because prior to having my son, this was like daily prayer life, reading the Bible regularly, and then from there I had the baby and was just struggling in the sense that you're struggling to keep awake, much less try to read the Bible. Your mind is racing everywhere. You're trying to figure out how to keep this little person alive, on top of all the other troubles that I was having. And then and so you've got all this to-do list of trying to learn on the job. And then you're thinking, oh, I still need to read the Bible. I still need to pray to God. I still need to do all of this. And I haven't done all of this yet. And my head is hitting the pillow and I'm asleep. So yeah, it was a really, really challenging period. And then you've got the guilt of, oh no, my spiritual life is going out the window. And then on top of all the other guilt that you're feeling because you've got a child. So everything that you do is wrong, even though you're trying your best. So yeah, it's just you got this whole variety of emotions that's just happening in you, and you just how do you actually grapple with that? Um,
Do you find I know sort of we had our first child, our daughter, right at the start of the pandemic. So 2020 March, just when everything shut down, bang, we had this new life, this child. So it was an adjustment for everyone, I think, to have lockdowns and to not have connection, to not have church, and then we had this new family member to look after. And I feel like even since then, before growing up, it was if you had a cold, if you're a bit sick, you would go to church anyway. Like church was a non-negotiable, non-optional activity. You went to church every Sabbath. That was it. And then we were being encouraged, well, if you're feeling a bit sick, stay away. But my kids get sick all the time. So we're actually having trouble finding a Sabbath where we're all healthy at once or don't have symptoms or aren't like tired from being up all night feeding. And actually just the practice of getting to church, something that I guess was a 100% constant in our lives, is harder now. It's harder. And so, I guess I have a two parts to my question. Have you experienced changes in terms of the pandemic as well with parenting and church attendance and worship and etc.? And how did you deal with, I guess, did it change your church attendance and your church active involvement, I guess, having that first child and as he was young, he might be older now, things might have changed, but through that early years, how did you find yourself feeling connected to the church?
it's funny that you mentioned that because so I didn't have my son. I had my son pre-pandemic, but after I had him, I felt this pressure, not from anyone else, but just on myself, like putting it on myself that I had to get ready and get to church on the earliest Sabbath that I can. And I just felt like that was the thing to do. I had to go to church. I had a child. That didn't change my life. I had to be at church. And it was really, really hard because you're tired, you're exhausted, and then you're trying to get a baby out of the house. Um, you got to bring, 20,000 things, the pram, the nappy bag, the bottles, the everything. And if you're doing it for the first time, inevitably you will need to tend to the kid just as you're stepping out of the house. And then you're late, and then you're just stressed, and then you're getting there, and then suddenly the kid needs to sleep, and you're not sure what to do. You're trying to rock the child. So you're walking outside the church, pacing the car park in the pram. And it was just, it was a bit of a shamoso. Um, and now it is good because I really enjoy the times when my son decides that he wants to go sit with his friend. So then he becomes someone else's problem. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, it is slowly coming back to normal now. But still, you don't fully concentrate anymore because you're
Mm.
trying to figure out where your kid is. You're trying to figure out what your kid needs. Your child is asking questions, and so you're kind of divided, just half listening to the sermon and half really just trying to focus on that your child doesn't, act up and do something crazy at church. And I think I might have lost track of your question.
What was the question, Jared?
Oh, I don't know. It was more of a ramble, but yeah, just in terms of, I guess with young kids, it is hard for some of us to attend church. Was my point, and I guess reflecting on your experience, it sounds like you felt that, particularly with young babies. But then even with as the kids get older, as you've been saying, you sometimes they're, oh, I'm hungry, I'm bored, I'm this, I'm that, and dealing with that. Gone are the days where you could threaten the child, hey, after the service, if you don't sit still and shut up, I'm gonna, you know, um, we don't. That's not really helpful, and I don't think it helped many of us to relate to church in terms of that sort of fear-based, like sit still, be quiet, or
The thing the thing that I really appreciated about my church during this time, I have to say, well, at the early time was that there was no pressure. And at that point of time, I was just before I had my baby, I was actually on the church board. And they actually acknowledged that I was going to have a baby. No, we do not need you on the church board. Have a rest. So they respected that and they put that onto me. I was the naive first time mom. I can do it. It'll be fine. Yeah, they said no. Um, and they also did, like, the community was there in the sense that they started doing this like meal train thing where they just dropped off food for you. They didn't want to have a conversation with you. They just wanted you to eat their food, which was very helpful. And the other thing that I really appreciated about my church when I started going with my child was the fact that they made it an emphasis that we are family friendly. And so if your child makes noise, it is fine. It is perfectly fine for your kid to be crying. It is perfectly fine for your kid to have a tantrum. You will be okay and we will embrace you. So that actually took half the pressure off because I didn't feel like my kid had to be, straight jacketed and duct taped at church. So that in that sense, I thought I really, really appreciated. But yet at the same time, so the church was supportive, everyone was supportive, but your own personal turmoil about the fact that you actually haven't really been listening to the sermon, haven't really been spending as much time with God praying, haven't been reading the Bible as much, much less doing the Sabbath school lessons because really all you want to do is sleep. That was hard on myself in the first little while. Then then it was interesting because then I started realizing that, hey, yes, I'm not spending all that time with God, but in my day to day, I'm actually still saying prayers to God in the sense of, please keep this child alive. And also, I don't really know what I'm doing. And occasionally you still continue. There's actually this constant conversation with God that I was still having. Um, and I think it started having this change of perspective because I started telling God actually the few times when I was actually awake enough to say something before I fell asleep was that, I'm sorry, God, it's not happening today. I I I'm not being able to be there for you. And I like to think that God started putting the messages into me to telling me that it is actually fine. It is okay. I know that you are not deserting me. I know that you are not um I know that you haven't stopped loving me. I just know that it is too overwhelming for you right now, and that is fine. I like to call it a spiritual bank. I mean, it's not. it doesn't really work that way in a spiritual life. Like it's not not kosher what I'm teaching. But I like to think that there is a spiritual bank in that I have spent this time getting to know God before kids. I know who He is. He knows who I am. We have a relationship going. And so at this point of time during this season in my life, it is really hard. But I like to think that God understands that as well. And that He's saying, it's okay. You need to focus on what you need to focus on. I'll still be here for you. I'll still be supporting you. I love you. And when you can, come back to me and I'll be right there for you.
Hmm. That's awesome. I like that point. I think it's important to remember that God's not like saying to you, "Why didn't you spend 7 hours with me today?" Like it's not like He would rather that than spend time with like your children, which are His children too. I think He understands that commitment that we have to raise children. So it's cool that you found ways, and I think it's also amazing. How you said before, like you had such a good community of people around you. But I suppose like not everyone has that community around them, and so like what are some ways that I guess that you learnt to, like you said one of the things was that you were just kind of praying constantly throughout your day. Were there other like moments or other things that you did that you found was helpful to connect with God when you just didn't have time?
Um, Not so much in the early, well, actually also in the early years, I should say that children's books, children Christian books. So I would try to, like, right from birth, the one thing that I really love books. I mean, that's my life, and so I want to have that in my son's life as well. Indoctrination maybe, but that's another topic. But so I would read to him and I would read a lot of things to him and I would just spend every evening, that's the routine, before bed, we'll read a book or two. And so that's when you go, well, actually, there is the normal, like, normal children's books that you read, but there's also Christian children books that you could read to him too. And so that's when it started, is that's where I started doing my reading of the Bible. Um, and now we have gradually progressed on, this is actually the thing that I'm doing with my son every morning, is that he's got one of those kids illustrated Bible. So it's all abridged versions of the Bible and there's beautiful pictures, and so we read that every morning. And so I am reading the Bible too, in that sense, just not, the Bible that we're used to as adults, but it's a Bible that I'm reading to him, that I'm learning stuff through as well.
Mm. It's sort of, I think there's a lot of research and statistics in the area of passing faith on to your children and how important, I guess, the parents' practices and uh, belief and involvement is. And just going back to what you're saying about that bank of experiences that you've had, and living that authentically. Like if your child sees you not being hypocritical and actually incorporating faith into your life, like the stories that you read and the stories that you tell, they pick that up. It sticks with them. Is retained in their, as they grow older. They get that. And I liked what you said about I guess how that has progressed. Like we've got some really basic sort of picture books that we read with my daughter. Um, and they're our special books for Sabbath. Like we don't read some of the other books that we have. We read those ones so that she knows that these are special for a special time with God. And I really enjoy doing that with her. Do you have any other, I guess, tips or ways or experiences where you've seen that your faith is actually impacted your spiritual journey, your time with God, because you have to be intentional, or you're finding ways to do that with your son, as in using your child to find ways to connect with God? I don't know how
Um,
that sounds, using your child, but
Using him.
you know what I mean? Actually doing it together.
Though doing it together and seeing, let me backtrack. I want to talk about prayer, because one of the things that I actually learned from my child about God is that I I really like to think that little kids matter a lot more to God than we think. So the reason why I say that is we try to inculcate, a habit of praying to God as well with my son. And at this moment, he's 6.5 now, so he understands a little bit more about you don't just keep praying to God and asking him for stuff. It's not just he's not Santa Claus. But in early years, it was basically it's trying to teach him, you talk to God because he helps you, he loves you, and he wants to listen to you, and he wants to help you. And during those early years when he was just he's learned to talk already at that point of time. He was probably about 4, maybe 3 or 4 years old. One instance that I can remember, a couple of instances was that we went camping, and where we were camping, it had really tall grass. We had one last 10 pack left, and somehow or other it got lost in the tall grass. It was that pack was kind of crucial in erecting our tent, and we could not find it everywhere. There were 5 or 6 adults who searched everywhere, could not find it. Said little child then said, "We're gonna pray about it." All right. I kid you not, immediately after he finished that prayer, one of the adults looked down and the tent peg was by her foot. And so it was just like, I think this is, you know, maybe if we prayed about it, we would have found it too. But I had this sneaking suspicion that God was trying to prove something to my son, that prayer works. The other thing that happened was we were at Manly Beach, and for people who don't know Manly Beach, we were looking for a free park. So that was the other obstacle. Trying to look for a free parking spot at Manly Beach is next to impossible. We circled the area round and round a few times, and then finally we decided that no, that's not going to happen. So my husband parked off the side of the road behind a car in front of a driveway and said, "You guys get off, and I will park the car somewhere else, and I'll come look for you." And so son was, quite upset about that, not wanting to leave his dad. I don't know why. And then then that was when I felt like, okay, well, why don't we pray about it? And so I've prayed with him about it, say that, let's hope that we can find a park. Once again, we open our eyes, and the car in front of us that had a legit free parking spot pulled out. And so we just rolled right in and got the spot. And I I don't, yes, I believe that God answers prayers, but I think when it comes to children, I mean, with exception, but I feel that God will answer their prayers specifically more if it is simply to teach them to believe that, yes, He is there and He will answer prayers.
That's cool. I feel like I want to find a child now and give them my prayer request so I can pray for some things for me. It reminds me of this story, just I guess on the topic of prayer and parenthood. There's this story where, is it Rachel or I think it's Rebecca? I get too confused. Rebecca, when she was pregnant with Jacob and Esau, and they're like wrestling in her womb, she's confused about what's going on, and so the Bible says she goes and she asks the Lord about it, and it's this like simple verse. It's like she went and asked the Lord about it, and then God like revealed what was going on to her, and this is just like wrestling going on her stomach. And I think that's a really cool thing to kind of like consider when like we're struggling with parenting and things and we're trying to figure it out, is like we can just go to God and, like you're saying, like pray about it or talk about it. Like it doesn't have to be this massive like, okay, I'm going to withdraw and spend an hour with the Lord in quiet. Like He knows that parenting takes a lot of time and energy, I suppose. But
one of the things that I actually started doing in the early times before, because I want the prayer life to be important in my son's life, right? But then, I've fall asleep without praying because I'm so tired. So, but because I find that it's important, before my son goes to bed, I pray with him. And then that's when, maybe everyone does that, but it took me a while to catch on to it that I'm praying with him already. So why don't I use that as my prayer time as well? And that actually kind of helped in that sense that I felt like, well, we can pray about the same things too, my son and I. So that's our communal prayer time.
And I think that's helpful to think about, because I think we often frame it as of different weight or different value. But what you're saying is that little children's prayers are very important to God. What we think is, well, I have to do my serious praying later, or my serious Bible study, my real Christian life. But what I'm doing with the child is just like a watered down, diluted version of spirituality. But if we want to model to our children those things, we should be doing it, obviously with some, not all the R18 plus version rated stuff in the Bible, but at least we should be doing it much as we would do it in our lives. I think sometimes perhaps we're too hard on ourselves for missing that, because we're actually trying to be superior to the actual times that we do have those opportunities to worship in that way with our children.
And I guess the encouragement is that, yes, even if it is watered down, right? It may be watered down at that season of your life. I like to say that, seasons in Ecclesiastes, but it will come back. When you're deep in the midst of it, you feel like you've lost it forever and it's never going to come back. But coming from someone who's been 6 years down the road, it does come back. It's coming back for me. It hasn't come back for me fully, but I like to believe that it will come back to me fully further down the track, and it will come back. And so I guess that's the encouragement that I wanted to give to parents out there who feel like they're losing it. It's getting diluted. It's all going to waste. It will come back. It will take time, but it will come back.
That's cool. I read this interesting study lately, and it was showing that like a lot of parents believe that they don't spend enough time with their kids. But the catch is that people are actually spending more time with their kids than they have in decades, which is not what we think. Because I think you guys maybe, or other parents carry this like guilt of like, I'm not doing enough. And like we have this comparison of like all the other parents doing all the things and carrying all the roles perfectly. But I like what you're saying. It's kind of like that time will come back, and like we don't have to be guilty because we are actually like doing enough. Like we're doing the best we can. Do you have some other things that kind of helped just like change your mentality when you kind of felt guilty or you felt drained? Or
it sounds weird, but I think it's more of it's normal. Like, I feel guilty. It's normal. And just trying to normalize the fact that I feel guilty. It doesn't really, it doesn't take away all the guilt, because I talked to someone once before, and they say that yes, when you give birth to a child, guilt comes as part of the package. So it will always be there. But I think just trying to tell yourself that this is normal, and accepting it, and trying to accepting it, but not just not doing anything about it. Accepting it and thinking of ways in which you can do better for next time. That helps.
And I think just pulling together some different things that we've talked about today, different stages is important to recognize as well, that it will get better. It is a season, or it is a really tough time now, but it might change down the track. And that's for your child as well. Like I always enjoy, times of community reading the Bible. I find it great to learn together with others, or even to teach in a capacity, if I'm teaching the Bible, speaking about the Bible. And I guess as my child gets older, my children get older, I'll have opportunities to teach them, or to read with them, do the stories, obviously, at less than 3 months old, my son's not going to get much out of that. I can pray for him, but he can't understand or have the thing. But down the track, that will change. Seasons will change. And I guess I'll find ways to connect with God by trying to help my children connect with God. And that's encouraging to know, especially for people who might be in a season of when that newborn thing hits, it's a very close, like you just feel under the weather, it's a storm. And you don't necessarily see that it's ever going to change, but it actually changes very quickly, and things, as they develop, the season changes, the chapter in your life changes. And I think, there's some encouragement and hope for all of us there. As we wrap, sorry, you were going to say?
I was going to say, it's also knowing that God's love is bigger than anything petty that you might think about, that his love is so huge that he knows your heart, and he really knows where you're coming from and what you're trying to do. And just resting in that and knowing that he knows what you're trying.
Just as we wrap up, Melody, and I think it's a really important conversation to have, to, I guess, normalize, as you said, the guilt, to raise awareness that parents in our churches and congregations, if they have young little kids especially, they might be struggling just to get to church. So, give them a smile, cook them a meal, that sort of thing. Would you have one practical sort of tip that you can leave us, either to support people in that time of their life, or alternatively that we can all try as parents to carve out time or space, or find places in our day to connect with God? What's one thing that you can leave us for this week to think about, to work on?
I think if you see a new parent or a new mom, well, actually not even a new mom or new parent, a mom or a parent in church, just give them a smile and tell them they're doing a good job, and encourage them, especially if they're having issues with a child throwing a tantrum. No parent wants their child to throw a tantrum at church. They are struggling and they're feeling horrible already. There is no need to send them daggers. There is no need to be upset with them. They know how disruptive it is. Just help them out. Even a smile.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of your advice, Melody. It's been great to have you on and kind of pick your motherly brains a little bit. I'm not sure, Jared, who do we have on next week? Can you tell us who's in the lineup?
That is a great question. I don't know off the top of my head. I didn't check it today. We have to say thank you to Melody again, because our guest for today, a funeral came up that they had to take part in, that they had to officiate, and it was sort of a last minute thing. So we've been a bit frazzled, but Melody had said at one point she'd love to come on, and she volunteered this week as well to help us out. So we really appreciate you, Melody, and wishing you and all the parents out there all the best with their parenthood journey, and stick at it. God, I think we've learned today, God understands. God's love is big enough to cover us. His love bank is big enough for us to take withdrawals if we're not making too many deposits. So I think that's the message for today. But enjoy your week, and we will see you next week. I think it's an author, Zanita, of a very interesting book. So awesome. we will enjoy that next week. But until then, God bless, and keep encouraging one another.
Thank you again, Melody.
That's all right. Bye.
Bye.